Well, turning now to the Iran nuclear deal. Tomorrow, President Trump is expected that he will announce that he will decertify the landmark agreement.
He once again slammed the deal in a Fox News interview last night, calling it extremely one-sided.
I think it was one of the most incompetently drawn deals I've ever seen. $150 billion given. We got nothing. We got nothing. It's a horrible, horrible embarrassment to our country. And we did it out of weakness when actually we had great strength.
White House and senior foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan is with us from Washington. Margaret, good to see you. So President Trump is expected to essentially punt the future of the Iran deal to Congress. What are lawmakers' options here?
This is a risky strategy because the president's giving Congress power to do something he could do himself tomorrow if he wanted, which is to reimpose sanctions on Iran. He's doing it because it's a way for his advisors to convince him to leave the existing nuclear deal intact, right? He promised on the campaign to tear it up. Not going to do that. Instead, they're going to go to Congress and ask Congress to write a new law that would set new goalposts for Iran. So essentially, he's trying to use the threat of new sanctions as leverage to get some new add-on diplomatic deal to deal with some of the issues he sees in it, specifically the fact that there's no plan for what happens 10 years from now when the nuclear deal expires, and there are some increased inspections that the U.S. and others would like to see in terms of access to military sites in Iran. But by doing this, the president is putting this existing nuclear deal in jeopardy, and that risks alienating all the partners in that, including those in Europe, Russia, China. It also risks confrontation with Iran. And U.S. intelligence agrees that this nuclear deal is working. So this is sort of a way to salvage it while getting more of what the president says is needed.
So what's the reaction from Trump's own national security team of advisors, military and diplomatic officials? How do they feel about decertifying this deal?
Well, they've pointed to the risk here because nothing is certain when you give Congress more power and when you, in some ways, take that leverage away from your own self. So they have advised keep the nuclear deal intact, but get tougher with other actions on Iran. So that means what we are expecting is tomorrow when this strategy is unveiled for the president to do things like targeting Iran's support for Hezbollah, a terrorist group that is really active in Syria and throughout the Middle East. It also means dealing with things like ballistic missile testing that Iran has continued to carry out. So they are going to get tough with a package of sanctions on Iran, not just focusing on the nuclear deal. So that is how his security advisors have advised him. But of course, as with everything involving this president, it comes down ultimately to him and whether he decides to overrule them. But we know the groundwork is being laid on Capitol Hill right now to move ahead with the strategy I just outlined.
And Margaret, if we do take into account Iran's support of Hamas, of the Houthi rebels in Yemen, will that impede Iran's assertiveness, let's call it, in the region?
Well, this is the thing. It's a gamble. The U.S. has already been countering and frustrated by Iranian meddling in the Middle East, whether it's in Iraq or elsewhere. But there is also an attempt by the prior administration not to get into a pitched battle with putting U.S. forces in direct conflict with Iranian forces, where they're very close on battlefields already in Iraq and in Syria. So there is some risk to getting more belligerent here. There could also be fallout for some of our allies, close allies like Israel, who is very concerned about the buildup of Iranian forces near their border and Hezbollah near their border with Syria. So there are some very real risks here to getting more aggressive with Iran that go beyond the nuclear package. But the president has campaigned, and many of his top national security advisors have grown very concerned about the expansion of Iran's influence, particularly in places like Syria and, as you said, in Yemen as well.
Margaret Brennan, thank you so much.